In this episode, Golden and I discuss Stranger Things Season 4, Volume 1, Full Speed Ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power. The Omega Beam.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 175. I'm your host, Oren Merton. Now, if you listen to this podcast, I'm pretty sure you already know that Netflix dropped Volume 1 of Season 4 of Stranger Things. To give you an idea of how much of a pop culture phenomenon Stranger Things is, at least in the USA, look no further than the fact that Kate Bush's 1985 hit Running Up That Hill is back on top of the charts thanks to being used prominently in the show. We start off spoiler-free before we dive in deep, so here we go. I am here with Golden to talk about Stranger Things Season 4,
Volume 1.
Volume 1. That's the way they put it because, you know, they're fancy.
Okay, so Volume 1.
So, how do you think this measured up to the other 3 seasons?
For me, it was kind of a slow start.
Okay.
And I think part of that is because you were following so many different stories. And since it was kind of jumping around, I feel like it just kind of got started a little bit slow for me. But still very engaging.
Yeah, Season 3 ended with Will and Elle going to California.
With Joyce.
With the rest of the Hawkins crew remaining in Hawkins, except for
Hopper, we didn't know what had happened to him, but we just also didn't believe that he was dead.
Well, what happens is he dies before the credits in that, thing.
Well,
but then
you think that he might die.
Well, the after credits scene was a Russian prison where they're talking about feeding some prisoner to their monster, and they say, not the American. And so that leads you to believe, oh, okay, that's Hopper.
Well, even
then.
before that, it was hard to believe that they'd kill off that character.
They kill off a main character.
Yeah.
But, they do kill off beloved characters. They killed off Bob, who was beloved. They killed off Billy, who wasn't beloved. But
they haven't been with the series the entire way.
That's true. He's been one of the OG, the original.
And that was just something I just couldn't see them doing.
Yeah, I understand that. I also really liked this. I agree that it was...
I do have to wonder real quick, if he learned Russian for Black Widow, how much of that helped him in Stranger Things.
There's a funny little... this isn't a spoiler, so it's going to still be in the spoiler-free section. Since, the trailer has pictures of Hopper in a Russian prison, so this isn't a spoiler. But in an interview, he had said that because he was in a Russian prison in Black Widow, he kept sending pictures to the Stranger Things crew saying, don't make it like this.
Yes.
They have to be different.
Which is a very good idea.
Yeah, well, and there's such different tones, such different stories, but I thought it was funny. Anyway, yeah, I see your point because they did, usually each season begins with everybody in Hawkins, Indiana, but in this one, it began with a 3-way split. And it becomes even more of a split, which we'll talk about later. But this does have sort of a lot more like A story, B story, C story, D story, whereas I think some of the others were a little bit more straightforward. Now, even in the first season, Will is on his own, but it's still the same story. It's just he's in a different place for it. So I definitely do see that. I really liked this. I felt that, first of all, as a kid who grew up in that era, so much of it just rings true, nerdy kids playing Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, how can I not, put myself in the scene and go, yep, that was my jam. I mean, I didn't happen to have a friend with superpowers and, monsters under my town, but, nonetheless. But this sort of it's more than half, right? Because they said that part 2 is only going to be 2 episodes.
Sorry. Volume 2.
Volume 2, thank you, yes.
Will be 2 movies.
Right. One is 1.5 hours. The other's 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I mean, it's like having two movies, which is an interesting. I mean, that shows the flexibility of streaming. Because
Yeah.
if you decide as a director, hey, look, this is great, and I get we got episodes, and I know an episode is normally 60 minutes, but I only need 35 here. But over here, I think I'm going to need 90.
Right.
Because I don't want to split this story up. And I said that with some of the Star Wars or the Marvel shows, that they're using the time that fits what they want to say.
Right.
They don't have to use fillers. They can just say, this is the story that I want to tell, and this is how long it's going to take me to tell it.
Right. Yeah, I do like that. And this is, Volume 1 is 7 episodes, and they vary in length, but I think the shortest one is an hour.
What would be kind of neat to find out is that come when it's released, that it pops up in theaters.
You never know.
If they did, and this would be the smart move. The smart move would be to do, what's the company that does it?
Oh, Fathom?
Yeah, Fathom Events.
Yeah.
Fathom Events says, okay, you know what? It's being released on this day. So that night, we're going to play, what is it? Chapter 8 and Chapter 9.
Yeah.
Back to back. We're going to sell tickets.
They'd sell.
Yeah, they would
definitely
sell. And you'd be
Yeah.
seeing it with a lot of people that are there for that.
Yeah. So, ending our spoiler-free section, if you love the cast from the previous 3 seasons, they're all here, they're all great. You can tell that we've kind of watched them grow up. I mean, we watched them as young teens, and now they're in high school, and the actors themselves have gone from young teens to older teens and college-age teens. So it's like old friends back in your house, and they of course inhabit the characters so well. You know, I absolutely love David Harbour as an actor who plays Hopper, and everything he does is wonderful. Winona Ryder, this is just a fantastic part for her. Joyce is a fantastic part for her.
He was also saying that she's been like the glue.
Yeah, she's great. She's really great.
Really been one of the people that has really held it together.
And they're all there, and they're all just as engaged. No one's phoning it in. The story is good. Like Golden said, there's more threads to follow, so that can be a little bit more. Well, if you like all the threads, it can be more engaging, and if you wish there were less, maybe a little frustrating. But and obviously the effects are fantastic. The sound is fantastic. You know, all the polish and production has been fantastic the entire time. I will say, from my perspective, I thought first season was a revelation, absolutely amazing. Second season was incredibly good. Third season, I enjoyed it thoroughly, but it was the lesser of the 3 in my opinion. And I think season 4 is more back to basics, and I just absolutely loved it. Maybe it's because it was more tied in, or they're all, the boys attempt to process all these amazing, horrible things happening by sort of filtering it through their experience of Dungeons and Dragons. And that's how they kind of try to make it more digestible to themselves, so they, in season 1, they named the monster the Demigorgon, which is a Dungeons and Dragons monster, not because the actual creature resembled the game creature, but because that's just how they could understand it. And then you had the Mind Flayer, which is another Dungeons and Dragons creature, and it's a different one in season 4, which we'll mention in the spoiler-filled section because they don't mention the name in the trailer. But I think because it's another D&D figure, maybe that I like a lot. Maybe it's one.
Well,
maybe that had to
it's
do
a D&D figure that they're actually coming across basically in the game that they're playing in the show.
Right. Yeah. So it was tied in better. It meant a little more to me. The acting is great. Of course, every season they've brought the old characters back and introduced 1 or 2 new characters. So this time, one of the new characters they introduce is Eddie, who's the dungeon master of the D&D game. And I think he's a really cool character. At first, I was a little like, come on, over the top. But after a while, I was like, no, I dig this guy. So if you like Stranger Things, you will love this. If you haven't watched Stranger Things, go back to season 1, watch them all. It's totally worth it. 3, 2, 1 spoilers.
And you're talking about Eddie, and I think a lot of people that play D&D aren't the ones that will go out there and fight the monsters necessarily. So when his character is confronted with something that is just supernatural and real,
Right.
he just runs.
Right, yeah.
He doesn't know what to do.
Right. But and he kind of and he hates himself for it. He's incredibly
But he also
ashamed.
But he's also aware that if he stays, it's not going to be good for him.
Right. But I think that's one of the things we love about Stranger Things is because it's obviously totally and completely fantastical. Of course it is. But at the same time, the characters are grounded. And I think that with Eddie was just another example of how a lesser story might have turned him into a knight in shining armor because it's, more heroic. But no, he's who he is. And it made sense, and it was right.
But he does actually.
He gets better. I mean,
I love his reason for going after. The first guy goes through Watergate.
Right.
And both of the girls are like, yeah, we're going after him too. And his excuse to him was, I couldn't have them go and not go because
I didn't want to be the one who was too chicken to go.
Yeah, these girls did it with no concern. They just did it.
Right.
And he didn't want to be the one that was left behind because he just wouldn't do it this time.
Right.
I think watching the first few episodes, the friendly orderly who befriends Eleven, played by J.B. Campbell Bower.
Oh boy, what a creep!
Who
in the best way.
Yeah, and I even said to you, I said, wow, he's very creepy. And you said that, Millie Bobby Brown actually started crying a couple times.
Yeah.
And I didn't recognize him at first from Sweeney Todd.
Uh-huh.
But he's one of the main characters in Sweeney Todd.
Okay.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just very creepy. And he starts talking about one. Because no one knows what happened to one.
Right, because the line they're all told is there is no number one.
Yeah, but he tells her, and he's trying to help her succeed. We could say grooming. And I was starting to think at that point that maybe he is number one.
Right.
But I didn't actually come to the conclusion that we find out at the very end. And, we're thinking, she opened the gate. She's the one that caused all these people to die.
Right.
And it's not the case.
Yeah, that's another thing.
And they did a very good job at suggesting she was responsible.
Right.
And in some ways she is.
I did want to mention this in the spoiler-free section because this is certainly more than you get in the trailers. I thought they did such a great job of tying in this new wrinkle in the story, this new bit of world building into the lore from the first season. Everything is tied together so incredibly expertly.
Well, then, I told you that there are people that believe, and I didn't get this at first, that Vecna is actually responsible for the Demogorgon and for the Mind Flayer.
Yeah, I saw a fan theory that maybe Vecna is pulling all the strings. And certainly that's possible, and it'll be interesting if we see that in volumes 8 and 9. I didn't necessarily pick that up myself, but certainly I wouldn't rule it out. So the season begins with 11, who's in California, going by Jane, which was her birth name.
And she's not fitting in, but she's lying about it.
Right, because she doesn't want to feel, she doesn't want anyone else to know just how bad it is for her.
Is it Will's with her?
Will's with her,
oh, sorry. She's not lying to Will.
Right, but
he doesn't know she's lying.
I really thought it was interesting that she starts with no powers. Because of all the badness with Vecna, she is confronted by Dr. Paul Reiser, whose character name I forgot, who says, look...
Sam Owens.
Dr. Owens, who says, look, we have to get your powers back because I don't know how else we can fight this thing. And she's like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. I hate to put myself through all this, but I also really want to save my friends.
She wants to be a superhero.
Yeah,
again.
she wants to be a superhero.
She feels like she is nothing without her powers because she's being treated like she's nothing.
Right. So she goes to the Nina Project. She goes to basically this abandoned nuclear missile silo in Nevada. And who would show up there but Dr. Matthew Modine, who is the guy who basically tortured her as a child.
Dr. Martin Brenner.
Yeah, Martin Brenner. And she has to put her trust in the guy who tortured her, but felt mentorly. I almost hate to call it fatherly. He made them call him Papa, but he wasn't a loving father to any of them.
I think he really did care about them.
But he cared, yeah.
Yes. He cared about them.
He cared. And you saw that when they do the flashbacks
And
of all the
what did you do?
He was broken. He was upset.
We think that he's talking about her killing everyone.
Right.
When it's really just
The gate.
her freeing one. That's what she did, is she freed one.
Yeah. And I thought it was just a nice twist on the story and incredibly well acted by Matthew Modine and Millie Bobby Brown that she's not being held anymore. He says this is not a prison you can leave. So this time she's not being held against her will.
She was at the very beginning.
Right. But she's put in the position where she has to trust the person who she blames rightfully for a really twisted childhood. And I thought that was a really interesting twist and played really well by both actors and was completely believable that she would be like, this is bullshit, I hate you, but I want the result and I know that you really can be the one to deliver it.
Yeah.
And for all that this is a fun little fantasy coming of age / horror story, I think that there really is depth to the story.
They do a
and
really
to the
good
characters.
job at like tying things together.
Yeah.
I mean, they end up in Los Angeles and they're going to drive back home. They're going to drive back to Hawkins, but they're going to make a stop and visit someone that can help them on the computer because they need information. And who do we get? But Dustin's girlfriend.
Right.
Who was just briefly introduced at the end of the last season.
Right.
And there's been some mention of her. But they get to see how she lives because they just stop by her house and say, we need your help.
Right. She was there both to help, also a little bit of comic relief because she's from an
eccentric family?
Well, exaggeratedly large and wild Mormon family in Salt Lake City. So it was like they sort of played on how big some of those families can get because of their religious objections.
And you've
to
got this lovely
contraception.
pizza car driver, pizza delivery driver that he's made friends with while in California.
Right, who's this constantly high California surfer dude. So that
because it's funny, we mentioned that Joyce is there, Will is there, Eleven's there, but we left out someone.
Oh,
We left out Jonathan.
we left out Jonathan.
And Jonathan's made friends with this pizza delivery guy, and he's not sure what's going on with Nancy because he doesn't want to go to college.
Right.
And this pizza delivery guy is just like, oh, well, just have some more, drugs. You'll be fine.
So one of the things they do this season, because Jonathan and Nancy are separated, is they kind of maybe reignite Steve and Nancy, if nothing else, because they're both in Hawkins, part of the Hawkins plot.
Even if they're not dating, they
Right.
still very much care about each other.
Right, and so they make it seem like,
That's
a
why-
will they, won't they kind of thing. At the same time, Jonathan is thinking, are we on, are we off? So, there's a little bit of, I don't even want to call it a love triangle because they're not in it together. They're just sort of all having their own thing going on. I generally hate love triangles. Whenever there's one in a story, it just immediately upsets me because I think it's like just shallow, bad writing, in my opinion, to let's create tension by creating this love triangle when really they could just all sit down and work it out in 5 minutes. But this one, I felt it was better done and better earned because it was not 3 people in the same town just trying to play each other off each other. It was 2 people long distance dating, having doubts if it'll work, and another person in town who's broken up with that person, but also wondering, well, is there still,
Yeah.
and I thought that was, again, more grounded, and I felt it was handled better.
I already knew going into watching it that there was like a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of feel to it.
Right.
And they
There
brought
kinda
Robert
was.
Englund in.
Yeah.
They brought Robert Englund in to play a character, and it was just sweet to see him back in something that is somewhat horror, not being Freddy,
Right.
but still being kind of creepy and
Right.
tormented.
And speaking of the horror, one thing I should say is, I've said on many previous episodes that I do not do gore. But one of the things I've always liked about Stranger Things is it's always kind of PG-15 horror.
I think this one's kind of been a little bit more gory.
It's a little bit more gory, but it's more body horror of bones breaking.
Like we said at the end of the last season, they talked about the monster. So Hopper does find himself going up against the creature, and unlike the other Russian prisoners, he knows the creature.
Right.
He knows what the creature doesn't like. So he's able to kind of get them to go along with him and have some sort of plan instead of them just dying. And it almost doesn't work because the fire doesn't last.
Right.
And he also doesn't know that Joyce and, hey, it's Murray.
Right. Murray's back.
Murray's back. Have made it all the way to Russia, and that wasn't the easy way to go either because they had their hiccups.
Right.
But they're able to open the right doors for Hopper at the right time.
Right. Literally.
Yes, literally.
Open the right doors. Of all the threads, I would have to say that the Joyce and Murray arc to get Hopper from Russia was maybe my least favorite. And not because Winona Ryder isn't wonderful, and not because the actor who plays Murray isn't, and not because I think David Harbour was anything but the most spectacular dealing with his horrible situation and thinking it was just hopeless. But I just felt...
Your favorite scenes was him trying to get the manacles off.
Yeah. I have a very hard time imagining that no matter how much Joyce felt for Hopper, that as a devoted mother who was literally going insane season 1, trying to get to her child,
But she knows where her child is.
But that's
They're safe in California.
They are safe in California, but I don't think she'd just up and leave like that.
She's only going to be gone for one day.
Yeah, but still, I would have thought she would have made sure there was an adult than just her oldest teenage son who's still in high school. Hey, watch everybody else. 17-year-old. I mean, that's not how you do it. And I don't think she would have done it. I think she would have been...
I don't think that she thought there was a choice.
I honestly, when Murray was brought in, I had first thought, oh, okay, she's going to go for Hopper and Murray's going to babysit the kids.
Mm-hmm.
That he was there to be the adult.
Yeah, no, he needed to go with her.
He did, but at the same time...
Because otherwise, he can't impersonate.
Right. No, there was every reason.
Ivan, Igor.
And he, as somebody...
Crazy playing guy.
Right, and as a character who's not married or with children, I mean, why would you let someone like, babysit your kids for even one
But she doesn't know that Eleven's having problems.
Right, but even so, I think she would be more responsible than to leave 3 minors alone in a house.
They did have adult supervision. The adult supervision just got killed.
Yeah, but she didn't know the adult. No. It wasn't a decision of hers to put them there. So that's the thing that was like, come on, she would have called a friend. She would have said, okay, you're going to Julie's house for a day.
It's probably best that she didn't, because that person also would have died.
Right, but she didn't know that. I mean, she doesn't say, well, I'm going to Alaska, and I better not send you to a friend or whatever, because you're probably going to be shot at while I'm gone. Yeah.
I mean, they did also admit, because people pointed out online, that it was Will's birthday and no one acknowledged it whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I wonder if that was...
It was overlooked.
By the writers.
From the articles that I read,
right,
it was
that the writers
just overlooked.
Neglected the fact that it was his birthday.
They missed it, but the fans caught it.
Right. Well, so it goes. I didn't know until, you mentioned it.
Yeah,
but...
we also watched a video on how long the makeup process took for him.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That is what made Millie Bobby Brown cry, was the first time he walked on set in the makeup. Is she?
I just thought it was just him.
no,
in
she
the
just
scenes
saw
because
it and burst out crying.
because yeah, he just was so creepy in some of those
Right.
scenes that I would actually believe that she would just start crying.
Right. Well, part of it was, the actor was saying that what he would do to like get in the mindset of being basically a monster is before takes he would like it sounds like he's not like a method actor who needs to stay in character all the time 24/7, but before takes he would pace, he would start talking to himself, saying like things that read serial killer typey things, just generally psyching himself out so that when he got to set, got to the scene, he was in that space. So I'm imagining that Millie Bobby Brown, having never seen this really, tremendous, horrible, prosthetic makeup, and then just his expression and his mannerism of evil. So, but yeah, he was great. He's not a cardboard cutout villain.
Definitely not.
He is fantastic, and when you get to see him in flashbacks as one in
The friendly orderly.
the friendly orderly, boy, he just inhabits that role in both the best and the worst way. He is legitimately terrifying.
So one of the things that we haven't touched on is Lucas.
That's
Lucas goes into high school and he wants to be popular.
Right? He wants to be one
So
of the
he
cool
starts
kids.
playing basketball. He gets his shot. He makes the winning shot.
Yeah.
And he's popular and he gets to go to the party with them. And then all this shit goes down. They really believe that Eddie killed the one kid's girlfriend because
Christine,
they don't know
think.
what's really going on. And Lucas finds himself in this position where now he knows these guys they're going to go find Eddie and they're going to kill him. But what is he going to do? Is he going to really turn his back on his friends? And then they learn that he is friends with them, and it's just very interesting. And even after the guy sees one of his other teammates get taken by Vecna, he still believes it's Eddie.
Right. Because Eddie's in control, is a pawn of the devil as far as he's
Yes.
concerned. Yeah, well, but that's just another thing they touch on, which was 100% and totally real, was for those of us who did play Dungeons and Dragons in the late 80s, there was what they called the satanic panic, that people were really saying if you play D&D, the devil would inhabit your body and all this other stuff. And that's what this jock believes. Whereas Lucas, who also played D&D with his friends, knows, no, it's just a game.
Yeah,
Pretty
I love
athletic.
his sister taking his place at the D&D,
Yeah.
and them not at first wanting to accept her because she's a girl.
Right.
My first experience of D&D was in 5th grade. One of the kids that I went to school with, I'm going to call him out here, Cameron Scott.
Cameron, if you're listening,
Yeah.
you have been officially shamed.
I wanted to play, and they told me I couldn't play because I was a girl.
Telling you.
So,
and by contrast, our group, if we would have had like a girl who was interested, we would have been
Well, this is
amazingly
also
thrilled.
10-year-olds.
Well, we were a little older, but
So that was one of my first. So I didn't get to play.
yeah.
I didn't get to play for a long time, but they show up with her and they're like, oh, we don't want to. But she calls him out and
Right.
basically proves to Eddie that she belongs at that table.
So speaking of the call out, I'm going to have to talk about one of my very, very minor pet peeves, because as a player, so Stranger Things has always done a very good job when it comes to getting the era of the 80s right. And there's,
Yeah, they even had Freddy Krueger in the video store.
yeah, there's a few anachronisms here and there. I know videos have pointed out. But, all the D&D stuff they had, the DM screens and the dice and the little figures, all period appropriate. Everything looked right. Everything looked great. One thing that bothered me is, as you were saying, when Lucas's sister, Erica, is proving that she knows the game, she's talking about her character to Eddie and says her character is a rogue. Now, for those of us who know Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, we know that back in the 80s, there was no character class called rogue. It was called thief. You were a thief. And then only in like 3rd edition in the late 90s or 2000s.
It might have been 2nd.
No, I have the 2nd edition Player's Handbook. It's still
Okay.
thief. And then they changed it from thief to rogue because all of the negative connotations of thieving and being a thief, they didn't want, they didn't want
I
their
like rogue
game.
vegetable.
They didn't want their game associated with any of that thing, so they changed it from thief to rogue. Even though players knew they didn't mean thief necessarily, like you're, robbing old women on the street, but that you're stealing from graves and dungeons and whatever. But anyway, like you said, I understand why they made it, and I don't think the writers did not know that, because I know that the Duffer Brothers played D&D in the 80s. So I absolutely I'm totally convinced they knew that, and it was a conscious anachronism. Like you said, it's a better word. I mean, rogue is more versatile, but also because they didn't want, an 11-year-old girl of color saying, "I'm playing a thief" on 2022 television.
Okay.
I think it was just, they didn't want to go there. They didn't want to give parents, these objection, religious groups another reason to bash them. So I understand why they made the change. It's not, like I said, it only irked me for, 5 minutes?
And then you came back to it.
Well, obviously I'm
And then
coming
you came back to it.
because it was one of those things. But it doesn't take anything out from the
So
story.
Duffer Brothers, if you're listening, can you please just call him and let him know, or email him and let him know that you made the decision on purpose, so he can let it go.
Interestingly, the Duffer Brothers went to the university that is half a mile away from us.
Okay.
We happen to be living not far from a very good film school. So yeah, like I said, I mean, this is a really good volume 1 of season 4, and there's a lot in it. There's a lot to it. Even though this is the spoiler section, you can be sure that we haven't told you 10% of the story.
Well, you also can't see what we're telling you.
Right. I mean, it's if this is the kind of thing that you like, I think you're going to be wholly satisfied, and your only real complaint is going to be, why the hell do I have to wait for volume 2?
Volume 2 is too short.
And volume 2 is too short, yeah.
But no, it's very good. It's very good, and I think that you will enjoy it immensely.
Yeah.
If you've enjoyed the first couple seasons, you'll enjoy this one.
Right. Well, thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/175. If you like this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your reviews help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full stop.